afternoon. My name is Kimberly Fine. My partner, Neil Handwerker, and I have co-founded Ex Judicata to support lawyers considering or committed to moving from law to non-legal jobs in business. In doing so, we have created this webcast series, If I Leave the Law. Today, we will be exploring non-legal careers in the world of compliance and ethics. This event will be recorded and will be available on demand via the Ex Judicata website. We will be monitoring the Q&A. Please submit your questions. We are using the upvote feature, so if you see a question from a fellow attendee that you would like answered as well, please click the upvote icon. It is now my absolute pleasure to introduce our panel. Bart Schwartz. Bart is the founder and the chairman of Guidepost Solutions, where he provides compliance, ethics, integrity monitoring, and investigative services. He has served as chairman of the Compliance Committee and a member of the Audit Committee for the board of HMS Holdings Corp. He has also served as the first chairman of the board of a public biopharma company, Cadman, as well as serving on boards of directors for philanthropic organizations, including the Police Athletic League of New York City, where he is the president, as well as Stuyvesant High School Alumni Board of Directors. Bart is a JD that pivoted. Prior to transitioning to investigative services, Bart served as the chief of the criminal division for the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York. Tiffany Archer is a JD who pivoted from AmLaw 100 law firms to a career in compliance. She is the former global head of compliance, risk, and privacy for the Paul Corporation. Before joining Paul, she served as regional ethics and compliance officer and corporate counsel for Panasonic Avionics Corporation. Tiffany is using her expertise and entrepreneurial skills to build out a consultancy that provides a comprehensive risk and compliance solutions which foster business evolution while upholding ethical business practices. Tiffany currently serves as an adjunct professor at Fordham Law School, as well as an instructor for the Society of Corporate Compliance and Ethics. David Greenberg. David is a 3-time CEO and a 3-time board member. David serves as chair of the Governance and Risk Assessment Committee and member of the Audit Committee of International Seaways, one of the world's largest global crude oil and petroleum tanker companies. He is also a partner in a private equity firm and oversees its majority investment in Blacksford LLC, a premium RV rental company. He is a former partner at Arnold & Porter. David also served as senior executive and chief compliance officer at a Fortune 10 company. Marcus Hartman. Marcus is the general counsel for Mr. Car Wash, the largest car wash operator in North America. Before joining Mr. Car Wash, Marcus held senior legal and compliance roles with pharmaceutical, technology, and consumer products companies. Prior to his legal career, Marcus served as a helicopter pilot in the United States Marine Corps and flew in Desert Shield, Desert Storm. Thank you for your service, Marcus. Rounding out our panel is Adam Turteltaub. Adam is the Chief Engagement and Strategy Officer for the Society of Compliance and Ethics, Corporate Compliance and Ethics, and the Healthcare Compliance Association. He is the host of the Compliance Perspectives podcast. He joined SCCE 16 years ago with more than 7 years of experience working with ethics and compliance professionals. I would like to thank our panel for their time and commitment, and a very special thank you to all of you for attending. It is now my pleasure to turn it over to Bart.
Hi, thank you, Kim, and welcome everyone. It's an interesting group that we have listening in. Some of you are lawyers who are in compliance programs already. Some of you are in law firms, and I think there were some people as well who are in law school. But I think it would be helpful, even for those who have some experience, to talk a little bit about the different environments in corporations versus law firms and other businesses. And I'm going to start off and then turn it over to the panel members. Because I also want to talk a little bit about why or I made a change, and I hope it would be helpful to you. So let's talk about the why first. Um, you really have to know who you are. And it depends how much experience you have. It takes time to learn who you are. Often it does. It did for me. And I felt very comfortable solving problems. And although my work as an assistant U.S. attorney and chief of the criminal division was very rewarding, and I didn't think that I really was solving very many problems. I was solving individual problems. And I was very good at pointing fingers and blaming people, but I wanted to do something a little different to try to help people with solutions. And that's why I started to look around and see what might be out there, what was around. I started investigative work directly out of becoming chief of the criminal division. And I'll be very honest with you, most of my friends thought I must have lost my law license or my mind, or maybe both, because they didn't understand the change that I was making. For me, it turned out to be a wonderful change. It gave me lots of opportunities to do more than I think I could have done in a law firm. But let's also talk a little bit about the governance environment, that fits in part with some of the things that motivated me to make a change. In a corporate environment, if you are able to, and you should be looking at your company very carefully, you get to understand what their culture is. You get to have a single client, and in a corporation, you're really very much of a problem solver. Law firms, particularly in compliance, are more likely working on process and also dealing with specific problems and just dealing directly with those problems. While as a member of a corporate department, what you're really trying to do is serve the business, but do it properly, and to help people achieve what they want to achieve and doing it the proper way. And pride in work is very important. So it's important to look at the company as a whole and see if that's a place at a cocktail party you're happy to say who you work for, rather than to just name the industry you were in. So I'm gonna now turn it over, and why don't we start, Marcus, with you talking about the question that a litigator never asks is why you did something, why you're pivoting, why you decided to pivot. And as I've described you in the past, you're our only recidivist pivoter. You've done it more than once. And I think people would be interested in what motivated you and how you did it and why you made changes.
Hey, thanks for the opportunity to respond to that, Bart. I guess if it comes to me being a recidivist, I'm really sort of recidivist twice over, since I've had two significant compliance roles, and I think both of them were really valuable in making me a better lawyer. But the first compliance role was actually with Daimler Chrysler. For people here familiar with what was called Dieselgate, our friends at Volkswagen sort of got in trouble with EPA, DOJ, and CARB for making claims about clean diesel. At the same time, Mercedes-Benz had a similar sort of issue. The approaches of the two organizations were completely different, but it goes to what I was able to learn, goes to why I've been a recidivist, as you've called me, because it was so interesting having a compliance role, you know, when you're in the midst of a huge sort of potential lawsuit with the government and you're dealing with the possibility of a monitorship. When I was able to join Mercedes-Benz for those efforts, I really felt like I was VP of North American compliance for Mercedes-Benz, but I was able to bring so many of my legal chops to bear in helping sort of solve those problems, negotiate with the government, sort of anticipate where things are going. and be in a position where, because I'd been both, I'd done litigation in a law firm, but I'd also done transactional work, to sort of have the perspective to say there's more to life than confronting or litigating with the government, and being part of a team that sort of really sort of negotiated for a good solution where ultimately Mercedes-Benz did not get a monitor and Volkswagen did. So a couple of years later, in the midst of the sort of the COVID fallout, which sort of had an impact on my career, I was able to sort of leverage those skills and the background to engage in a compliance role with Stryker, where again, the opportunities there when you deal with the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, because Stryker was a global company, the anti-kickback statutes, all those things really, for me, again, as a recidivist, it's sort of a continuum. There are times when you're ready to put on your litigator's hat in an in-house counsel role, and there's times where you're a compliance officer. So I've seen there's a dichotomy, and like you said, when you're in a compliance role, people are like, well, what are you doing with your law degree? And sometimes you're working with people who don't have law degrees. But I've always seen my law degree and my legal experience to really sort of leverage up what I can contribute as a compliance officer. And I think that's one of the reasons for the recidivism, because I've developed skills that have allowed me to sort of work in both worlds. And if you're with the right organization, with the right sort of time, again, the compliance roles sometimes are the most interesting when Uncle Sam's breathing down your neck, but it does lead to sort of very exciting engagement. And that's why I've gone back and forth.
Marcus, I'm going to ask you a specific question, and then also of David and Tiffany. What particular skills do you think help you most in the transition, and what new ones did you need?
I think going into anything, intellectual curiosity is probably number one. And we all go to law school for different reasons. For me, I think it was more of a personality defect. It's like sometimes you follow the law, or the law finds you. If you would go back to people I went to high school with, they would have said, yeah, he's going to be a lawyer, not necessarily a compliment. So intellectual curiosity as you go into these roles, and then of course critical thinking, but a sympathy, whether it's a client-based empathy or a empathy for what the business is trying to accomplish. Ultimately, intellectual curiosity and empathy, I think, are probably the most important traits to have as you go into a new role.
For me,
I'm sorry, what I would have to add to that is humility. Because if you're going to have intellectual curiosity when you go into these roles, you can't go in pretending that, well, I'm a lawyer, so I know all this compliance stuff. You have to go in with a sense of humility and being able to sort of say, here's what I don't know. Because I think that it helps you succeed with the business.
There are different reasons we go to law school. For me, it was organic chemistry. Tiffany?
Thank you, Bart. So the first question is, why did I pivot? Is that correct?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
Why, and the skills, and what helped you, and whether you needed new skills.
Sure. So I spent about nearly 6 years in private practice, focusing on white collar defense, securities enforcement, and also a large chunk of my portfolio was in the FCPA space. So traveling quite a bit, meeting with clients all over the world, and really learning a lot about the FCPA, all types of schemes, and also a lot of differences within cultures and cultural norms. Quite candidly, at that time in my career, I realized I did not want to be a partner, but I was really fascinated by the work I was doing, and knew that there were so many learnings and skills that I had acquired that I felt that I could certainly hit the ground running in-house, trying to really amp up a compliance program for an organization, particularly one that might be kind of grassroots or new. So I then looked to pivot to find a place where I could put those skills to work, as quickly and as efficiently as possible. So I did have a couple of opportunities before I got to a more senior role in compliance, starting in the hospitality industry, several financial institutions, ended up at Panasonic for quite a few years. That, although not great for Panasonic, was a great opportunity for me professionally because I did have the opportunity to work on its monitorship. And for those who do not know, a monitorship is is a time when the company is allegedly involved with conduct or wrongdoing, and ultimately the DOJ assigns a monitor and requires the company to make certain modifications or remediations to its program in order to strengthen it, whether that be its policies, its internal control framework, and the like, its personnel, so on and so forth. So it was a really great experience for me to actually have hands-on experience, work with the government, work with our monitor, and also truly understand what a gold standard program really looks like. So that was great for me. And then ultimately, I became the global head of compliance, risk, and privacy, also the chief compliance officer of Paul Corporation. So, kind of got to what was my target role within the compliance sphere. And that was also really exciting. As far as skills that I needed, I think that one of the most important skills was being a really good listener. Coming from a firm, the culture of a firm and the way a firm works, it's not necessarily entirely transferable. The culture is different. Whereas you can turn to an associate or work with others to look up what the law is and understand what the approach should be. When you go in-house, you don't have all of those resources right at your fingertips. So sometimes you have to be swift to act. Sometimes you have to really think about collaboration and understanding how the business works. What industry do you sit in? How are things done ordinarily? To Bart's point earlier, how do you get to the best outcome and make sure that you're doing it correctly? And also, compliance, many of you probably are aware, but we're often referred to as the police or obstructionists. So how can you ensure that we're getting to the outcome that the business is looking for and leadership is looking for, but getting to that outcome in a way that feels collaborative and in a way that feels we're being empathetic to their needs, the hurdles that they may be facing, and doing it as expeditiously as possible. So I would say being a great listener and really understanding what it is that they are up against, while still synergizing that with what the compliance expectations may be. I would also say getting your arms around what the cultural differences are in the organization that you may join. So understanding what that global footprint looks like and making sure that you're mindful of who your stakeholders are across the world. And a great resource book that I have referenced often is The Culture Map by Erin Mayer. So for example, in Germany, you might find that your stakeholders are a bit more curt or short, and you may feel that they're not really being open to you, but that's not really the case. That's just kind of how they are there. Whereas in Latin America, they're friendly and almost, as an American, I used to feel they're so casual, but it's not that they're not taking business seriously. It's just kind of their way of life. They do business over meals and alcohol and all those types of things. And so understanding that and embracing that, and kind of when you're having your first meeting, showing that you're aware of that, I think also really helps to build trust and makes them feel like you are one of them. And I think that will always help to further that relationship and really help you go further in your discussions, trust building, providing advice and the like with your stakeholders around the world.
Yeah. Thank you, Tiffany.
Sure.
David, really the same question for you, and maybe I could add something to it if it's the right question for you. Uh, as you pivot from one role to another, were you treated differently by people in the company, in the organization?
Sure. Well, look, I think left the law and a law firm 36 years ago. So that's a long time. Have not practiced law one day since. And every single day since, there's something about my legal training, experience in law school, experience as a lawyer, that I've found extremely valuable. So that's one thing to say. Why did I pivot? I think on the day I made partner, I was partner number 102 at my law firm. And I had a client offering me the opportunity to be in a leadership role in a major company. And to me, the level of excitement and level of challenge was not comparable. So it was a no-brainer for me, even though I thought it was potentially a very risky move. And all the lawyers in the room who've been in law firms know you work really hard to be named a partner. And I was named a partner one day and I resigned the next day. That was a big gulp. What have I learned, and what did I need to know in the pivot? The last time I ever really felt like a major expert was my last day in the law firm, because law gives you an opportunity to really know your stuff. And if you have an interesting business role, there's just way too much to ever feel like you have command of the field. So you need a different level of command. It's not expertise in a specific area. It's the ability to draw on resources, organize coalitions, exercise leadership, inspire people, many things that are important in the law, but didn't have the same premium. I think Marcus mentioned there's some humility necessary. And I would say being a corporate executive, being a CEO, being a director is constantly a humbling experience, because you're dealing with so many issues and so many things you don't fully understand. And you have to decide who to trust and who to empower and things like that. It's much less out of your own intellectual control. I would say, I really do say that there's something to being a great lawyer, which is you can feel totally in command of your field, and you got to give that up if you're going to move into a corporate role. And Bart, I forgot your extra question if I didn't answer it.
I think you did.
Okay, great.
Good start. I think thank you. Adam, you have probably the broadest vantage point of any of us. So I really have two questions for you. I believe that you believe lawyers are well trained to take on the role of compliance and ethics officers. So I'd like to know why you think that. And then any suggestions that you have for lawyers who are seeking to make this change, either whether it's training or whatever advice you can give, because I know you really have a view that none of us have.
Thanks, Bart. Yeah, I think lawyers are very suited to this role. Not being one, I have the expertise in that. But through the years, it's quite clear that lawyers predominantly have assumed these roles. Though over the last few years, we've seen a lot more people out of business units, internal audit, HR, and elsewhere taking over. Compliance starts with the law. It's what does the law say? What are the requirements of all the regulations? Sometimes it's pretty simple and clear. Sometimes it can be complex and nuanced. So having that background is very helpful. If you don't have it, you can go to your in-house counsel for it. But having that background is helpful. I think the key thing in terms of preparing for that role, though, is realize you're not there to practice the law. It's like, in some ways, you need to sort of become outside of that experience and figure, okay, how do I make all of this relevant for all these thousands of people in the organization who aren't lawyers? What do they need to know to stay out of trouble? What kind of controls do we have to have in place so that if someone starts to stray, we start identifying it early and can hopefully head off something when it's a situation, not yet a problem, and certainly not yet a crisis. It's someone who also understands the idea that culture, which I think David touched on earlier, is important. Knowing what kind of operating system you're in is how do people act? Are you in a very risk tolerant culture? Are you in a very risk averse culture? Because that's going to affect people's attitudes towards the law and towards the business. And are they going to be pushing the limits, or are they going to stay squarely between the lines? And I think a lot of it also is reorienting your thinking so that you help others see the role. People talk a lot about compliance people being the brakes. I think compliance people should be thought of as the traction control, like it is in a car. I mean, traction control is there so that when you slam down on the gas or the brake, the car keeps going in the right direction. It doesn't start veering out of control. And that's really, I think, what our job is in compliance, is to make sure that the business can keep moving forward in a controlled manner, and one that doesn't risk taking it off into all sorts of crazy ways. Other ways to prepare is do your homework, basics, understand what compliance programs are, take advantage of everything from an introduction to the federal sentencing guidelines that's available on the Sentencing Commission site, to reading, all the free resources that you can find online, whether it's from our website and our newsletters and things like that anyone can get, to looking at vendor pages, to talking with a lot of people that out there, so that you go into the job with a better sense of not what you think it is, but what it actually is.
That's very helpful. I'm going to ask each of you one sort of a quick question, because it's one of the issues that I dealt with when I stopped practicing. Because I didn't stop thinking as a lawyer, but I stopped practicing. So you're in compliance, you're dealing with the counsel's office, and you see they're making a mistake, or they're giving the wrong advice. How do you handle that, Marcus? You're on mute. You're on mute.
Well, I'll revert to my lawyer-like response, and that is, it depends, right? So one of the things that I've seen in both organizations where I've had a compliance role is it depends on who compliance reports to. So if compliance reports directly into the C-suite, as in the CEO, that allows you a certain amount of candor when it comes to assessing the wisdom of the legal advice. And again, I think as it might have been David spoke about earlier, when you're in a compliance role, you're not the lawyer. So you do have to take extra care to make sure you're not trying to substitute your legal advice for the general counsel's legal advice or the office of the general counsel legal advice, but how you can approach that and how candid you can be about where you see the infirmities if they're making a mistake oftentimes depends on, are you reporting into the general counsel's office or you're reporting into the CEO? If the compliance function has a direct line to the board or the CEO, I think you can be much more direct in how you are assessing the wisdom of the legal advice. Political realities, if your boss happens to be the general counsel, you probably have to be a lot more diplomatic as you approach sort of pointing out some of the flaws in the logic. And quite frankly, I think in a situation like that, you want to really hope that there's an opportunity before the meeting to sit down with the person that you think has made a mistake, to hopefully have that discussion with them privately so they're not surprised, assuming you want to stay in your job for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, I think the way I dealt with it in a similar way, because I was at the table with seeing lawyers making a mistake, and so was but their clients were in the room. I'm never going to say with their clients present that I thought this was a mistake or anything approaching that. But fortunately, with most of the lawyers I dealt with, they're open to hear other ideas, and especially if you do it one-on-one, it's appreciated. David?
Yeah, I think 2 points. One, it's a relationship thing. And by that, I mean, are you working day to day closely with lawyers? Are you aligned on strategy? Do you work closely enough that everyone understands their roles? If that's true, you're more likely to be able to head off these situations. The other thing I'd say is that one of the great benefits of having been a lawyer is that when legal issues come up, even though you may not be the lawyer anymore, you can talk to the lawyers as much more of an equal. There were many, many, many times in the company where a lawyer would say no to something. And I would say to her or to him, you can't say no to me. I used to be your outside lawyer who you asked this question to. So, we're going to talk about that. We're not going to just, have you put up the stop sign. And Marcus is right. Reality intervenes. It depends a little bit on your level and your political clout in the company, and you're much better off if you're in the C-suite and you're independent than if you're not. But even in the cases when you're not, I think your background as a lawyer can be helpful, and your understanding of the lawyer's role and your ability to build a relationship of trust and collaboration based on that will all minimize the number of times what you're hypothesizing comes up, and when they do come up, how to work your way through them.
Tiffany? You're on mute.
Automatically unmuted. Okay, thank you. To me, I've always been an advocate of compliance having a seat at the table. So to Marcus's point, whether compliance reports to its GC, whether their compliance and the legal function are separate, whether compliance reports to a CEO, I've always been an advocate of compliance having a seat at the table, because I think in order for the overall legal and compliance or legal function to be effective, compliance should have the opportunity to at least weigh in, because a lot of the times they're closer to the ground on a lot of these issues that eventually are elevated to legal for advice. So to the extent bad advice might have been put out on the table or even in front of clients, personally, I would ask for, maybe can we take a break for a moment so that the group is separated and pull the appropriate people aside. And I would ask for the opportunity to, reframe and maybe posit my view on that particular situation, obviously as diplomatically as possible, but to just put my view in there too, just for the purposes of consideration, before any sort of major decisions are made, because it's a lot more difficult to call back a decision that has a negative impact, should that be the case, than it is for us to speak, collectively and kind of maybe revamp the path forward. So that would be the approach that I would likely move forward with.
Adam, yes, please.
Yeah, let me jump in here. I mean, One of the things also to remember is sometimes the legal advice may be right, but the compliance advice may be something completely different.
Right.
And that needs to be considered. So hypothetically, you discover maybe it's low-level corrupt payments being made in some place. And legal advice lawyer may say, we have no duty to disclose this. It's small, it's localized. Let's just make it go away. That may be fine legal advice, and it's a business risk that you won't get caught because the odds seem low that you would. But from a compliance perspective, it may not be the best advice. There one is the issue of advantages of self-disclosure. Conceivably, they could still be in a nightmare, but maybe people in the company are talking about this and they see that it's getting hushed up and the company's willing to hush it up. That can be very devastating from a compliance perspective, even if it's an adequate piece of advice from a legal perspective.
I think
And
there-
that speaks to culture, right? Because then it's saying the tone at the top is not supporting their messaging around transparency and upholding compliance and a culture of compliance and integrity. So it starts to have tentacles, in my view, if that type of situation were to present itself. So I agree with you, Adam, on that point.
Yeah, Adam, I think there were at least two really important points you make when advice is being given on the kind of example you gave. Because I've been in those meetings, and there's always someone. Well, almost the first question that's asked: who else knows? Then advice is given along those lines, and I've always told clients any plan which has as a foundation that a secret will be kept is a flawed foundation. It just doesn't happen. And there's a lot of experience that I think supports that. The other thing that I think is that I'm hearing is that you have the opportunity to influence the culture. We talk about culture, but you have a real opportunity to influence the culture, and we shouldn't fall into what I think is a bit of a trap that compliance is a hurdle. The compliance really is part of what the company is doing. That culture should be, as they say, part of the DNA that things you want to do the right thing, and that helps with a lot of decision making and who you can talk to and what you can say. It makes it a lot easier to be in that kind of environment. So I think maybe what I would along those lines, maybe the next thing I would ask you about is in trying to help people navigate a change in their careers, because it's not an easy things to do. What should they be looking for at a company and or an organization, and maybe a little bit about how you do it, not just what you look for, but how you do it. Adam, can I start with you?
Sure. And well-timed question, because I just did a podcast, a couple of them about looking for new jobs with various people. One was a compliance officer, one was a recruiter. There's several things. One goes back to, I think Tiffany was the first one to raise the culture issue, is try and figure out what is the culture of the organization? How valued is compliance? And there's some clues to that, such as where does it report? Does it report to the CEO or the compliance committee of the board? Or does it report to an assistant general counsel? Or is it a part of risk? None of those things by themselves are red or green lights. It has to be looked at in the context, but you should take a look at those things. Also understand what the expectations are for the role. Are you going to be dealing with every single legal and regulatory risk out there down to occupational health and safety? That's probably too broad a remit to do the job effectively, and it's one that shows it might be a dumping ground, or is it a fairly well-defined and executable thing? Also, look at little things like, is there budget for travel? If you're a big multinational or even a US-based company that's got offices all over, are they going to let you travel or not? Because if they don't want you to ever go to meet with people, that's probably also a sign. And take a look at overall at what the budget is for the department. Are the resources adequate there for you to be able to do the job? And then the other thing to take a look at as you're doing things, somebody gave me a good tip on the recent podcast, is understand, is the job in person, hybrid, all remote, and how does that compare to what the rest of the team is doing? So if, for example, the rest of the C-suite is in the office 5 days a week and they tell you, no, you've got a 100% remote job, that may mean they don't want you around. And that's something to look at. And then take the time on the culture front to do things like look at sites like Glassdoor.com and see what people are writing about the organization. You know, are they complaining about the fact that everybody is out for themselves and management doesn't care? Or are they saying it's a place where you can go to work feeling confident in the morning that you're at the right place to be? And then, you know, take advantage of, David was joking before we started about my LinkedIn profile. See who you know, take advantage of LinkedIn, see what people are saying there too. So there's a lot of, fortunately, online resources, but really try and look for the subtle signs of, is this a place where they really value compliance?
Right.
Or are you just going to be a nameplate and a door that nobody ever opens?
You know, it
Right.
makes me think a number of years ago, a friend of mine, it was before it was really called compliance. It was still internal investigations and IG type work. He was hired by the governor of a state to look at corruption in the state. The day after he was hired, the state legislature passed a statute making recording of conversations all party consent. So he resigned the day after that. But any other
Following in David's footsteps with career
Yeah.
promotions and resignations.
right? That's right.
Everything that Adam said is absolutely spot on. The other thing, which is more, it may sound opportunistic, it depends on when or where the organization is. If an organization is in the midst of a DOJ investigation and there's a possibility of a monitorship, you're going to be in a situation where that compliance department is probably going to be adequately resourced. It'll probably have C-suite sort of access. You know, one of the things about joining Mercedes-Benz / Daimler while we were in the midst of the EPA DOJ CARB was, boy, were they well resourced. And I was flying to Stuttgart pretty much on a bi-weekly basis. And there was, you know, I was able to hire 10 people for my North American team within a 6-month period. So, you know, it's sort of like, as a Patriots fan, it must have been great playing on the Patriots 5 or 6 years ago. Now it's not quite as exciting as it was. I think it's a similar thing with compliance. If the organization is compelled to really value compliance, that's a great time to be with the team. If it's sort of post monitorship and things are steady state, there are still great opportunities, but I think where the organization is when it comes to dealing with compliance challenges can also impact how exciting the compliance role will be.
I was the monitor of General Motors, and after they had their steering problem, and Mary Barra, who was and still is the CEO, had a videotape made by the Chief Compliance Officer and the General Counsel, in which they explained what a monitor is, what the monitor does, what's in the monitoring agreement, and most importantly, that she wanted to get value out of the process. And that tape was distributed to the top 300 executives in North America. And it had an amazing impact on the cooperation and everybody's effort to try to do the right thing and get a good result. So often a company in crisis is often the best place to be. You certainly learn a lot. Kim,
I was going to just jump in for a second. We have 3 really excellent questions. And while I know we have some more items that we would like to discuss. This is really for the attendees as well. So let me go ahead and read the first question, and then Bart, I'll defer to you on who might want to pick it up. Coming from the law school space, wondering about advising our students on this path. Would you encourage students to practice law before pivoting into the world of compliance, or is there a direct path from law school to compliance?
That is an excellent question. Tiffany, would you like to start?
Sure. I would say probably about 10 years back, the traditional path would be practice law, pivot to compliance. But I'm seeing now that the trend is having a law degree, well, having practiced law is not a prerequisite. In fact, what I see in a lot of job descriptions, and people who I mentor will tell me, oh, they're looking for a compliance credential. And in fact, they'll say to me, and I've been in this space for like over 20 years, do you have one? And I'm like, no, I don't have one. I don't know that I need one, but maybe I should talk to Adam about that. But yeah, I'm seeing that that's actually not the case, even up to the level of chief compliance officer. It seems to be that, you know, they're having more of a willingness to see that a person who has a law degree obviously has the capability. They have the, you know, Marcus brought up the point earlier, you know, that type of analytical thinking. So if need be, they're able to take the fact pattern, apply the applicable regulatory framework or whatever may be the legal issue at hand. But as far as being a successful compliance officer or being on a successful trajectory as a person, a compliance professional, I'm seeing the trend shifting towards not needing to have practice law, traditional law, before moving into compliance.
Thanks. David?
Yeah, I can't totally disagree, but I have a little bit different perspective. The opportunity to practice law in what I'd call a big law firm can open up a lot of possibility. The people you'll run into, the clients you'll run into, nothing good has happened in my career based on a resume. It's all happened based on people who knew me and worked with me, whether that's, you know, getting a leadership job in a major corporation to being a CEO to being a director. If I had relied on headhunters and resumes, I'd probably be in some backwater now. So the other thing I'd say is that the kind of expertise and the kind of exposure you can get in a law firm can sometimes accelerate your career. I went essentially from being an associate, a partner for a day, to being a vice president in a Fortune 10 company, and jumped about 12 steps compared to having started at the bottom in the company. So I think it's a very kind of fact pattern specific based call, but I wouldn't ignore the significant kind of opportunities that can open up when you do go through a traditional law practice.
Marcus?
Yeah, I would say, again, it depends on your risk tolerance and how confident you are when you graduate law school on what you're going to be doing for the next 20 years. Because I think David and I, and it sounds like Tiffany too, I don't know that I could have sort of forecasted what my career was going to look like as a 3L. But I do know that if I'm going to sort of hedge my bets, it's probably easier to practice law first and go to a compliance role. I think if you go right to a compliance role when you graduate, you pretty much are gonna have to stick with that because I don't know that there's that many law firms or employers that are gonna take somebody 5 or 6 years out and say, okay, now you can act like a first-year associate again. So that I agree with Tiffany. I think that career path is there. And I know there are plenty of law schools, especially in the Jersey area, that are sort of putting that compliance credential out there. Like I get that approach, but if I were going to mentor somebody or give them advice, I would say if you have the opportunity to work in a firm for 2 to 3 years, it's sort of like, if I had it to do over again, I probably would have done a clerkship. I wanted to start making money. So going to Hale and Dorr was the best way to go. But, in hindsight, I think that clerkship experience would have been a great one. And if I had to tell today's law graduates, if you can get a good quality law firm experience for 2 to 3 years, and you're, between 25 and 30 years old, don't pass that by. There's a lot to be learned in those settings.
Yeah.
I'd like to suggest a third path, which may not be exactly for this group, but it might be. Some of the best compliance people are people who are experts in their own industry. And they are respected most by the business people, that they understand the industry. So expertise in an industry may also be a path to compliance and to responsibility.
And to pick up on that excellent question, and maybe this is one for Adam to start with, is an SCCE or similar certificate important if somebody has their JD in pursuing careers in compliance?
So on the whole, look, as much as I'm a champion of the association, our certification versus a JD, it's a certification versus, a university degree. There's a big difference there. On the other hand, we're seeing, we have a bunch of to become certified, you're in your certified compliance and ethics credential, ethics professional credential. You have to have at least a year working in compliance, 20 hours continuing education credit, and pass the exam. We have a growing number of law schools and some other university programs where they're affiliated with it and they're driving people to it. So we're seeing a bit of a blending there. And I would say if you go look through the jobs on our website, you'll see a lot of them say that certification is preferred. And that helps because people know that somebody walking in the door doesn't just understand, say, the law, they understand compliance. But I don't think having the certification is a barrier to someone in the law to do it. And I think part of it, gets to the fact that if you've got a good story to tell about what your experience is and how it's relevant for the job, that can overcome a lot,
Yeah.
My own career, I spent 2 years on Capitol Hill, 13 years in advertising before I got here. And a lot of times, people look and said, why this? And it's like a lot of jobs are connected and a lot of skills are. And if you can get in the door and start talking about them, I'm sure, Marcus, you've talked about your time in the military has had more of an impact than your law degree has had probably on a lot of things. So, having skills is good, but hanging your hat on just one thing is probably not a good idea.
So Adam, I think for people who are early in their careers, one of the values in taking the courses that you provide is that you've demonstrated an interest in the subject matter.
Mm-hmm.
Not just showing up, okay, now I want to be in compliance.
Well, and you also have an idea of what you're getting into,
right,
and what is considered best practice for it. Because I think a lot of people go into any job, whether it's compliance or other, thinking, oh, I know what that job is like. I still remember when I had my internship on Capitol Hill in college. I thought I was going to be there to change the world as a staff member. And somebody said, no, your job is to get your boss reelected.
Yeah.
That is the job of a staff member. Now, passing that legislation helps get them reelected. But a lot of jobs are not what they seem. And I think for compliance, a lot of lawyers go in thinking it's about the law. Internal auditors go in thinking it's about controls and auditing. And when you get there, you realize it's a lot of different things. And having sat through, whether it's one of our academies or just gone to a conference, listened to a webinar, whether it's ours or somebody else's, it starts giving you a sense of what it is, so you know what you're getting into.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And that actually dovetails with another very interesting question. What is your steepest learning curve in building an effective compliance program, which entails skills such as marketing, sales, project management, data analytics, and technology? So I think what they're asking is what's the biggest challenge in the skill sets that are needed to build a successful compliance program?
Anyone?
I'll take that one. In most of the programs I've seen, and in speaking with colleagues just to benchmark and things like that, I would parse out some of these elements. So data analytics, technology, project management specifically. I would say that these three are usually given to a particular project team. So while it would fall under compliance, it often has responsibilities for other functions within the company so that they can use that data for forecasting purposes, for trending purposes, for decision-making purposes. So I wouldn't say that it's particularly a compliance specific role. Usually you have, a data person, or it might fall under IT or something like that. And then the compliance, maybe you have a compliance lead or someone who's very strong in data who would liaise with the person who owns either your dashboard or perhaps your database or whatever sort of technology that you're using to kind of aggregate all of the data that's of importance. And then they would help formulate the reporting or what have you that you're looking for in order to drive the metrics that you're looking to see to then help drive your decision-making process. So that's definitely a steep learning curve, but you usually are using experts in this space because it takes a lot of coding. You have to make decisions on what software you'd like to use. So those three, I would say, kind of are separated. And then as far as marketing and sales is a function in and of itself. And then marketing also, they kind of also have a nuanced set of responsibilities that tie in to sales. So I guess I would say from a compliance role perspective, yes, it definitely ties into the program. But I would think that this anonymous attendee certainly made a great call out, but these are certainly very nuanced skill sets that often stand apart from what per se a compliance professional would manage. You would actually liaise with these people in order to help drive your program.
I think Marcus wanted to speak.
Yeah, so I mean, agreeing with everything that Tiffany said, but going back to one of Tiffany's earlier observations, the steepest learning curve, or what I would characterize as the biggest challenge in building up a compliance program, is the existing culture. Mm-hmm. So when I was tasked with building a compliance team for Daimler, again, playing out what Tiffany talked about earlier, Germans are a lot of things, but one of them they're generally compliant. So once the leadership at Daimler-Benz told the engineers that they were going to have to integrate compliance principles early on in the product development process, for the most part, everybody went along. There was some grumbling, but culturally, we knew that the organization had our back. Now, there was a certain med device company that, in my view, is the gold standard for compliance. But I was a compliance officer attending a medical device conference in Las Vegas. And that is telling about what the culture of med device sales were. So the real learning curve is what are you walking into in terms of a culture of compliance? What are you walking into in terms of culture? You have to learn the culture first,
Yeah,
because that will drive sales, marketing, product development. It's the organization's background and history has just as much of an impact as the functional silos.
yeah,
You know, I read that in part, this, what I was saying before in terms of expertise. I won't name the bank, but a number of years ago, a bank, in order to show their commitment to compliance, hired 200 compliance people who knew nothing about banking.
right, right.
And there was no respect for compliance, but they couldn't fire the people because that would look like they had given up on compliance. You know,
Sure.
over the years, they've gotten over that problem, but it's so for me, one of the steepest elements would be you got to know the business. You've got to understand the business if you want people to listen to you.
Definitely.
I agree.
Thank you so much. So we're getting close on time. What I've done, and I'll let the group that's still attending, if anyone emails me and they didn't get their questions answered, I will get your email to our correct panelist. And my email is kfine, F-I-N-E, @exjudicata.com. So I've been monitoring the chat here, but here's a really nice one to end on. And how we try to end these things is sort of like parting shots on your recommendation if one wants to pivot from law to business, but maybe we can incorporate this as well. How does work-life balance compare between compliance and the law? So if we could include that with sort of our parting words of wisdom, that would be wonderful. And then I'll handle questions offline as well.
And
David?
by law, just so I'm clear, that means private practice?
Well,
Correct.
I think that's the question. Private practice was corporate.
I think that,
Okay.
and unless the person wants to pipe in again, but I guess that's the
Okay.
way that I would take
Well,
it.
I mean, I'll take just a quick turn at that. I think in terms of a company, I think you'd be pretty sure you're going to be working very hard if you're in a law firm.
Get a sleeping bag.
Yes, but in a company, you're going to be working very hard too. But there are differences in companies. There are different cultures. So that's part of the due diligence that you have to do. The easy part of that question is if you go to a law firm, I guarantee you're going to work hard.
That is for sure.
Yeah, and I think it's worth noting. So much of this is dependent on the personality, because I do think for the most part, one of the reasons we have the work ethics that we have in law firms is because lawyers work there, and people who pursue law degrees and have this level of ambition tend not to be clock watchers who are punching out. They tend to sort of think of these things over the weekend. And if you bring that work ethic into a corporate environment where you're not just working with a whole bunch of lawyers, you're working with advertising and marketing and HR and everybody else. I've always found that, sort of being the hardest working lawyer in the law firm maybe gets acknowledged, but being the hardest working person in an organization, in a corporation, you tend to stick out. It's a little bit easier to stick out with what I call the lawyer's work ethic. And then the other sort of recent development is what we're doing now and the world that's changed so much in the last 5 years post-COVID. Work-life balance means something different when you can put on your fuzzy slippers and, get to the Zoom call and do work. The ability to work remotely, the ability to sort of engage in this type of exchange, that's changed a lot. And I can do this and then get a workout in before I drive into work. That's, in my mind, that's work-life balance. It still might end up being a 60-hour work week, but if I have control of my time, which I do think you get a little bit more in a corporate setting than you do in a law firm setting. For me, control my time, even if that means working 60 to 70 hours a week, that's the balance that I'm looking for.
I'd say there's, all things considered, a lot more brain damage coming from the reading and writing part of being a lawyer in a law firm. And the corporate side of things is much more human interaction and strategy and meetings and figuring out how to deploy resources, and a lot less of the pure analytical fingers on the keyboard, grinding.
That's fair.
And all I can say is, I never went to law school. I'm not an attorney. And everyone I knew who was an associate in a law firm made me glad I wasn't an attorney, and I didn't go to law school.
Don't say that.
But the people in compliance have always encouraged me that I should do that. So anyway,
After F1, after you do your stint as an F1 driver.
right, of course.
Right, there we go. This is great. We're really getting, we're actually over time, but any just, parting comments, advice for individuals thinking of making this kind of transition? And then again, this will be on demand for people. And if you have questions that weren't answered, please just send them my way and we'll get them answered for you.
I'd like to thank everyone. Yeah, go ahead, David.
My final thought is just, do the best job you can trying to figure out any company you're interested in and whether what you're going to do is important to them. Compliance, for instance, can be everything from a backwater to a route to the C-suite and the boardroom. It just depends on the situation. So try to know that going in. And I wish for you all that, any job you take is in an area where what you're going to be doing is on the CEO's mind when she wakes up in the morning.
Yeah.
And
I was just,
go
oh,
ahead, Tiffany.
I was just going to add that, fundamentally compliance is a human-centric and behavior-driven function. And I did want to make some comments about the intersection between compliance and behavioral science. Didn't get to that today, but would be happy to kind of summarize some points I was going to make and share it with Kim. And if she'd like to distribute it to attendees, I'd be happy to pull that together and share that with her. But the long and short of it is, you don't have to be a scientist to kind of put these principles into practice. And I think it's a great way for you to kind of test the company's culture. And then also, once you take that temperature, some of these, kind of go to it tasks will really help you understand who your stakeholders are, really forge those relationships and figure out what it is that you need to tweak so that you are really moving towards that culture of compliance if it doesn't already exist. And even if it does exist, it will enable you to really strengthen it so that you can really start thinking about, do I have bad apples, or is it that my barrel is bad? And you'll understand the references that I'm making when I send you, or when Kim sends you, what it is that I'm referring to.
I would just like to give you one last example, if I could, and Marcus, I hope you'll agree with me about this. I was a monitor at a defense contractor that had a serious problem that had been known throughout the company, and people told me, don't take that assignment. It's all military people, all former military people. They're not going to listen to you. They're going to do what they're going to go ahead and do whatever they think is the way they want to do it. And I took on the assignment. It was one of the easiest ones I ever had, because when everybody understood the mission, the mission was to do it the right way, everybody was on board.
Yeah, I agree. There's something about that's really sort of easy to identify when it comes to culture, when everybody's dressed the same way, sort of is living by the same rules and has a, that underlying philosophy. And again, I would agree that stepping into those types of compliance or environments can be really rewarding.
So I know a former member of the Joint Chiefs of Staff who wears the wildest socks you've ever seen. And I'm convinced it's only because he's had to wear a uniform all his life.
Exactly. Patsy. There's a lot of pent up flair that I'm sure he's dealing with.
Kim, we
Yeah.
done?
This was fabulous. Thank you very, very much. And we had
Thank you, everyone.
a lot
Yeah.
of people hanging in there with
Thanks.
us. So thank you all very much. And we'll do all the appropriate follow-up.
Great, thank you.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Awesome, everyone. Have a good
Bye.
day.
Thank you.
Bye.